Well, I'm here with Bruce Gould, a 54-year member of the CYC. Bruce, welcome.
Thank you.
How did you first get involved in sailing?
Well, I was raised in Hobart and I joined the first doing Sea Scouts, I think about 12. And we started racing boats that the Scout Hall had. And then we got into dinghies and we raced rainbows and tamer dinghies. We went on to I built an OK dinghy and then raced that. And of course, living in Hobart, you saw the Hobart boats in Constitution Dock in those days. And I thought that looked pretty good. And so I got talking to Boy Messenger and he arranged for me to do a trip back on Malawi in 1963. So we sailed back and...
Was it Malawi owned by Syd then? Or?
Yeah, it was owned by Syd then. And
did you run into Syd?
No, he'd flown back by then.
Right.
Anyway, I didn't bump into him. Then we sailed back up to Sydney and...
But how did you know Boy? Were you just a guy on the dock and looking for a ride, basically?
Yeah, I was just looking for a ride, yeah. And so Boy said, yeah, we're short of crew, so I sailed back with Boy. And we had a good trip back. And then I said to Boy, you know, I'm still living in Hobart, but what about seeing if you could get me a berth? So he lined me up with Sylph 6, with the Lawson brothers.
Dave Lawson, eh? Yeah.
Dave Lawson, and there was Billy Manning and myself, the Lawson brothers.
Tony Cable?
Tony Cable was on board.
Gee, some good characters there.
There were some very good characters there. And we did the race and it was a really hard race. It was blue. It got up to 70 knots and I think we took 7 days to finish the race. And I remember arriving in Hobart and having a beer with Boy after the race and he said, well, you've done your worst one. Well, he wasn't quite right, but it was a hard race. Yeah. Anyway, then that year I moved up to Sydney.
And why was that? Why did you come to Sydney?
I just wanted to keep racing, and I think Sydney was an exciting place, and it was time for me to break out of Hobart, I think, and so off we went, and then I raced with Bob. I think we did another Hobart on Sylph 6, and then I raced with Gretel Brown on East Nicholson 36, which I've forgotten the name of now, and went to Hobart on her and with Mark Tostovan, blast from South Australia, and then we did that race, and then.
But how did you get involved with Bob Crichton Brown? How did that come about?
Well, I managed to get a job in the Lumley group, and I was sort of.
Well, that's the insurance company that Bob ran, is that
correct?
Yep.
Yeah, it was the Lumley group. They had a life company in it as well. And I was a budding young accountant those days, so I got a job in the accounts department in Lumley's, and then Bob sort of started to get plans to build Balandra, which he did, and I remember getting a call from him about October saying, "You know Jock Muir, don't you? You were a bit of a boat builder." I said, "Yeah, I built a few boats." So he said, "Look, I want you to go down and help get the boat finished because we want to do the Hobart race in 1965.
This would be 65, yeah.
So I flew down to Hobart and I ended up down there for nearly 2 months, I think. I
not doing much accountancy.
Not doing much accountancy, but a lot of chipping. We got the boat ready, and then Jock Muir and myself and Neil Batt and I can't remember who else was on board. And we came back and God, we got around Tasman. It was blowing a screaming northeaster, and the boat was leaking like a bloody sieve. So we pulled into Triabunna, summons up a few of the guys and tools from Jock's work in Hobart, and spent a couple of days corking her up and sealing the forward hatch and a lot of other leaks all over the place. Anyway, we finally got her reasonably watertight, and then we left and arrived in Sydney about a week before the Hobart race.
That was in 1965, and I can remember seeing Balandra on the harbour. It must have been just after she arrived. She was a magnificent looking boat, and at that time she was one of the biggest yachts on the harbour.
Yeah.
You see her today, it's another yacht, but I mean, she just looked magnificent. Yeah. And then you did the 65 Hobart, and you were second to finish to Stormvogel, and I think fourth on handicap.
Yeah. It was a good race.
Right. Yeah.
And then, because we came back, and I bought the boat back again because I was working for Bob, so leave wasn't a problem. Gould, you were bringing the boat back, And then
not a bad way to do your accountancy.
No, it was a very good way to do accountancy. And one thing I did do was get out of accountancy in there and got into investment management, probably one of the better moves on that. Yeah. And we really got into the campaign for the Admirals Cup. And we're fortunate enough to get selected with Caprice and Mercedes and ourselves. And then off we went.
Yeah, but before that you did the 66 Hobart.
We did.
And second again to Fidelis.
Yes.
And a bit down the list on handicap, because I think that the small boats dominated that year with Cadence winning. And
I think, Cadence won.
Cadence won in 66. But Peter Green, who had a great history at the CYC and the Hobart race, he was on board from the early days, yeah?
Yep. And I'm on board for the Hobart race. And obviously he was the sailing master for the Admirals Cup. And we had Peter Green, Stan Darling, Billy Bold, another old hand.
Cole Burnell.
Yeah, paid hand.
Peter Henry.
Toaster Doran, Anthony Crichton Brown, and
Johnny Maynard.
Johnny Maynard, he was forward hand. Yeah.
But let's talk about that 67 Cup. I mean, that was the second challenge for Australia. We were runners-up in 65, and then we went in 67, and I mean, you're obviously a young guy then. It must have been a great thrill to come away with the cup. I mean, the Australian boats were 1, 2 and 3 on the point score.
It was unbelievable. I mean, as you say, all three boats did beautifully in the race. We had a few. I remember one drama we had in the fastnet race, because we're all doing so well, and we're running with a spinnaker down towards Land's End, and the steering started to give in. The sheaves on the side of the boat were collapsing, and so, and I was the only bloke small enough to get down the hatch. Plus, I suppose I was a bit handy with my hands. And we managed to shore it up, and we cut up some dinghy oars and floorboards, and Spanish windlasses and whatever else we did, and we fixed it. And then we went on, finished the fastest race, and of course the team, thank God we fixed that, because it would have been a bit like that time Coomaloo broke a rudder, because we did so well. It was so exciting to win the thing, just fantastic.
And you mentioned Stan Darling, who was the Balandra's navigator, but the team had, Bill Fesk on Caprice of Huon, Sidey Richard Hammond on Mercedes 3 and Stan on Balandra. I mean, 3 wonderful world-class navigators. But tell us a bit about Stan. I mean, you've obviously had a lot to do with him then, but a little bit later as well. But he was a phenomenal person and a navigator, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was one of nature's gentlemen. Lovely guy, fantastic navigator. Quiet, never said much. Every now and then he'd tell Bob to shut up. I know what I'm doing, because Bob was always giving instructions. But no, he was fantastic, Stan, and a really spot-on navigator. Those 3 navigators in that particular year, I think it was Bill Fest. They went to the university there and looked at the currents on the Solent, and they really had it off pat. They'd done their homework, and
they had a working model of the Solent over there at Southampton University, I think, and they were there for days and days and days, if my memory serves me correctly.
Studying the currents and the tides, because the tides run there, as you know, and never made a mistake. Just fantastic. Yeah.
And Bob Crichton Brown, later Sir Robert, who rose to Commodore here. How was he? How did you find him as a skipper?
Bob was. Look, he loved his sailing. I mean, he wasn't as expert as, say, Peter Green or someone like that, but he was a great owner, never spared a dime on the boat. Few funny stories with him. I remember he had his little cabin on Pacha, and he came out of the cabin, and we're bashing our way to Hobart, and we're scrapping up a mule because it was just blowing a gale, and we're beating it hard to windward. And Bob comes out and says, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm making a stew." "What cans are you using?" "Bob, there's no labels on the cans. Whatever comes out of the can goes in. It's going to be bloody hot, and that's it. Full stop." Oh, off he goes. He was a character, though. He was full of life.
And then on the way home, you had a good trip on the way home after 67, flying home. You went up to America?
We came home via New York, and so we all went up to Newport, and Dame Paddy was racing, and Warwick Hood was up there, and they welcomed us with open arms. And of course, having won the thing, that sort of gave the team a big lift. And it was just fabulous to be able to share that with another group of Australian yachties. We had a great time there.
Yeah, terrific. So back in Australia, and then Balandra, I think she was delayed coming back on the ship, wasn't she? She couldn't get back for the Hobart that year, I don't think.
Yeah, in fact, there were two. You just reminded me there were two things. The whole team nearly didn't arrive because the Suez War broke out, and they weren't in the Suez Canal, thank goodness. So they actually diverted down to South Africa, and they changed ships in South Africa, and then brought them up to Southampton, and we just got there in time.
Ted Kaufman had to fly to Cape Town, I think, to do the transfer of the ship, the yachts.
Yeah. And Balandra was late coming back that year, but.
And then you moved on to, then Bob got rid of Balandra and bought Pacha, I think.
He bought Pacha.
Right? And then we'll get you to the 1970 Hobart race, which was a tough race for all of us that were in it. Was started, as all Hobarts do, quite nicely, and then it just got worse and worse and worse.
And worse.
And worse, that's right. And Ragamuffin was the red-hot favourite.
Yeah, we were running neck and neck with Ragamuffin.
Yeah, and CYCA 2 was there.
Yes.
Arthur Burns' new development of Ragamuffin, but Pacha got the chocolates. Tell us about that race.
Well, as you say, it started off nicely, but then we got into a real hard sou'wester, and we sort of copped it from right on the northern tip of Tassie, and we bashed all the way down. For us, we'd gone well to sea, so we were right offshore. We're probably 50 miles offshore, and that really gave us a good angle to come into Tasman, and it was just hard on the nose and just a solid work. And Ragamuffin went inside Maria Island to get out of the bad conditions. And I don't know whether that was what gave us the race, but anyway, we got round Tasman and finished, and then we spent about 24 hours waiting to see if we'd won, and we did win, so that was my first Hobart win on handicap.
Fantastic. And Stan was the navigator then as well.
Stan was navigating as well. Yeah, good old Stan.
Yeah, she was a lovely boat, Pacha, wasn't she? I mean, she not probably quite up to the Ragamuffin in all-round conditions, but in that race she
pretty looking boat though.
Yeah. And then Bob sailed it to England after that. I think she sailed to England, wasn't she?
Yeah, she sailed to England. And,
did you do the Fastnet that race year on her 71?
I didn't. No.
No.
And then, so while the boat was in here, I started sailing with Syd then, and then we did the Hobart race on Rags in 73. And that was a pre-leader to going to the 73 Admirals Cup.
72 you would have done.
Oh, sorry, 72.
Ginkgo and Apollo 2.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then you went with Ragamuffin to the Admirals Cup for the 73 Cup. Yeah. And Syd? How was Syd?
Softest part of Syd is his teeth. A great bloke to sail with, though. And he was, by then, he really was a good sailor, Drove the boat hard.
Hard driver,
a good helmsman, and gave no mercy to anything. And just from the day, from the start of the race, as soon as that gun went, he was into it, and there was no reprieve until you finished. And drove a boat really hard. And she was a beautiful boat to sail. A bit like Love and War,
exactly.
Same era, but fantastic boat to windward. Absolute bits of
steer. We were the favourite going into the Admirals Cup with Ginkgo and Apollo 2, the Ben Lexon or Bob Miller designs, who were a bit ahead of their time. But the Germans popped up and won the Cup for the first time in 73, didn't they?
Yeah. It was a bit disappointing for us, but we
tried
hard.
We got second, I think, that year, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
And then after that, you drifted back, and
drifted back, and I kept doing Hobart races, and then Gordon Ingate started to get ready for the America's Cup Challenge in 77. So I got invited to sail with Gordon. So I went back into my boat building days again, because we had no money, plenty of donations, and a lot of hard work. But anyway, we made it, and then we went and did the challenge in 77. We had some fabulous racing there. We took the Swedes 3-all, and then we lost in the last race, so that sort of knocked us out of the series. But we probably had the best racing of all the challenges there, because we went 6-all, 3-all.
She was a great boat, Gretel II.
Yeah, she was a great boat. And
well, you mentioned Gordon. Let's talk about Gordon. Another great character. I mean, what a record! And he's still going strong at 90+ years of age.
Yeah, he's unbelievable, really. And his memory is so good. And I raced on Caprice with him, and that's how I sort of started to get into the Admirals Cup, into the America's Cup, because I'd done a couple of races with Caprice, and but he was such a character and very good sailor, really good sailor. Not as tough as Syd, but he just really raced hard.
Yeah, he was a good natural yachtsman, wasn't he?
Yeah, good helmsman, good yachtsman, and put a good crew together. And you always had a lot of fun with Gould. A lot of fun.
Yeah. And then I think you involved with Vengeance sometime after that for Hobart racing.
Yeah,
with
did.
Dave Kellett and the boys. And
when I came back from the America's Cup, Dave and I did Dave was part of the team, so we sort of teamed up when we got back, and then he bought. Well, Gretel was probably the first one.
The original Gretel. That's right.
Original Gretel. Yeah. I think we got a second in
1980 to New Zealand. Yeah.
That was a hard race too. Really hard running.
Good on a 12 metre, it'd be like a submarine most of the time, wouldn't it?
It was wet. But we drove hard. I remember putting this massive big yellow spinnaker up, and we'd been sailing all over the ocean, and we finally took it down, and then the breeze lightened off a little bit. And I said to Kellett, I think we should put this up again. The breeze is lightening, and so go for it. So off we put up this big monster of a yellow spinnaker, and we took off. And I think that was probably the one thing that might have helped us win get second in that race.
Yeah.
And then of course Bernard bought Vengeance, which was the old
CYCA from Raleigh Tasca.
Yeah, and so we got a line on us with her. I remember arriving in the dock, and there's my wife with two little toddlers welcoming us. It was a nice feeling that we could get line on us, so it really was.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we were lucky enough to then Bernard decided to build Sovereign, and so that was a challenge, and Kellett did a fantastic job of building that boat, and he was project manager. And then, of course, we did the first Hobart race in her, and we were about down bit north of Eden, and we'd been bashing into it all night. And I went up and had a look, and I thought, Jesus, that bloody rig on the leeward side's loose. Anyway, the cap shroud had come out of one of the spreaders, and it's probably bad luck in a sense, because we had the designer on board, and so we sent him up on the chair, and he had a look, and he said, "No, you fractured this, you fractured that, and the spreader's bent," and so we turned around with our tail between the legs and came home. And I often thought, if he hadn't been on board, we probably would have patched it up and kept going. But
designer knows best.
Not my call.
Yeah. So that was 86 and you retired, but 80 take you forward a year to 87. I mean, it all came together then for Sovereign.
It came back. Yeah, we really got our act together next year, and we got line honours and handicap.
First Australian boat to ever do.
Yeah. So I was pretty thrilled about that. That was I don't know how many Hobarts I've done by then, but it's hard to get the double shippers, I can tell you.
So you'd had 2 Hobart wins on corrected time and line honours as well, so that was fantastic.
It was. It was quite an achievement, that one. I think that was probably. Well, winning Hobart on handicap's pretty exciting, needless to say, because it's and to beat Ragamuffin was quite a thrill, because she was a hard boat to beat, because she was in the peak in those days.
Absolutely.
But to get the double was another big feather in your cap.
Yeah. Well, after 87, I think Sovereign went overseas then, and but you sail on a variety of different boats.
A variety of boats, sort of through there, and then we sort of lead up to the. The 98 Hobart race.
Well, I'll talk about it. I know that it's a sadness for us all, but I'm sure for you especially, because you were aboard Winston Churchill that perished, and 3 of your crew members perished as well. Any overview there you'd like to give us about that?
I've never seen conditions like that, and the seas were so big, and I think what happened to us, and it's always a conjecture what really happened, but we just went up the front of one of these rogue waves, and we got halfway up it, and it just literally drove us down backwards. And then the whole green water broke over, and it sort of cracked every all the cockpit windows, and because we had a cockpit cabin, and it just broke all those, and we got it back up. I'd just been changed helmsman, and so I'd just gone below, and I raced back up on deck, and we only had 2 on deck at that stage because it was, the conditions were so bad, and we had the backstage went into 2 at the back of the boat, and one of them was wrapped around that. Don't know how he got there, but he did when his feet weren't on the deck, and so we shook ourselves, and the mast was still up just with the skin of its teeth, and then we just pulled away, and we were the boat was full of water. Then we tried to get the motor going to see if we get some pumps working. Couldn't get the motor started. So we sent out a mayday, and I said, well, to Richard Winning, I said, mate, I think we just better get everything ready so that if we do sink, we're ready to leave, which is exactly what happened. And we got the 9 of us off into two rafts. There was no choice on the rafts. It was like whatever's there in front of you, get in. And then there we were, and the bloody boat sank within about 2 minutes of getting into the life rafts. And then we went through the night, and I think probably the worst memory for me is just when we turned over in the rafts. You didn't know whether you're upside down or you're still there, or you'd gone to heaven or what. And then we were lucky that we realised that we had to get the life raft back upright again, which we did. And but that turning upside down in the middle of the night was pretty horrific. And the next day we were still drifting to sea, and by then the breeze had dropped off a bit. It wasn't blowing 70 knots anymore, but we were still drifting, and then there was nothing sweet. And then the plane came across and actually saw us, so they dipped their wings to us, and we knew we'd been sighted, and because I'm not sure I wanted to go through another night drifting with not knowing whether anyone had seen you. And I can tell you there's nothing sweeter than the sound of a bloody big helicopter over the top of you. So we got the 4 of us off that raft. Obviously the rafts had split and gone their own way, and it wasn't until the next morning that we found out what had happened to our 3 crewmen, and I mean that was pretty devastating. Yeah. And we actually found that out in the bloody news interview, would you believe? And it was just because we knew that night because we landed at Malakuta, and we knew that night before we went to bed that they were in the process of found the other raft, and the Navy were doing the rescue because they're the only helicopters that could do a rescue at night. And we went to bed thinking we got all of us, and it wasn't until the next day we found out we'd lost 3, and that was pretty devastating.